People. Cameron Crow here, founder of Make Idaho Better. Oh, I still have Make Boise Better hats, so I need to make new ones. They're not ready yet, so we're going to be backwards until then. Okay. Um, for those of you that don't know, Make Idaho Better is, by the way, I'm going to tell you about analysis of our survey from this week. But first, I'm going to tell you what is Make Idaho Better. It's the easiest way to be a part of state and local issues, challenges, problem solving. What I do is I give you a chance to make your voice heard and make your point of view understood, or at least better understood, with short surveys, public results, and analysis on a weekly basis. This is our website, and if you want to join and contribute and help to make things better in your community and in our state, click this Do Your Part link and join our email list. Okay, this week our survey was about debt. How much debt people have, how quickly they're thinking about paying it off, how stressful it is, how much it influences their life, yada, yada, yada. It's a pretty big topic, and one that a lot of people are dealing with kind of at unprecedented levels, with an increase in or decrease in housing affordability, an increase in student debt, and a kind of leveling, not really increasing wages for middle class. So it's becoming a big deal. We've got the survey questions here if you want to check those out. The overall survey results are here, and the analysis link is here. And Michael Scott declares bankruptcy. All right, so let's talk analysis. So first, let's talk about who took the survey. Okay, well, we had about 84 responses when I did this analysis. You see there's gray bars here where there's a question mark. That means I don't know how, this is information I don't know for some of the respondents. Not all of our respondents have taken all of our surveys. So when I pull in previous answers for a respondent, they might not have an answer to a question that I want to use for comparison. So gender is one of those. So of the people that I do know who they are and how they answered that question, we heard from more women than men. We've got age for everybody because that was something that was in this survey. We heard from quite a bit more young people. If you add up the older buckets of the age groups, we'd probably have 40 plus would be about the same size as the 20s and 30s. In terms of counties, we're almost all in Ada of the ones that we know of. We've got a few from Canyon County and Boise County too. That's not that surprising. We just expanded from Make Boise Better to Make Idaho Better, so we're including everybody now. But it'll take a little while for those numbers to jump up, I think. And then in terms of debt, to give us some perspective on how much debt do the people have that took this survey, we're looking at, we've got a pretty broad spectrum from no debt to 700,000 in debt, and then somewhere in between in the like $100, $200, $300,000 in debt range. Okay, so why can't I click on that? I can't click on, bummer. All right, well, this is this chart that I'm most interested in, the question, how much does debt stress you out? This is really what most of this analysis is going to be about. How do different types of people think about stress from debt and how much debt they have and stuff like that? So as you can see, we're pretty spread out on this question. We've got a lot of people that answer every single way. So people that don't feel any stress, people that feel a lot of stress, and then people that feel, a middle amount. So we're going to dive into that. First, let's look at stress level by how much debt you have. So I thought maybe it would be intuitive. The more debt you have, the more stress you have. So in theory, the further to the right we go in these kind of general brackets of debt, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, or over 300,000, as we move to the right, we should see the red bars increasing in proportion. This is a scale. Green is not at all stress. Yellow is a moderate amount, and red is, a great deal with, some shades in between. And my take here is that at 200,000, you feel a lot of stress. But you kind of feel a lot of stress beyond that. It doesn't go up necessarily. Like we're about 50%, maybe 55% in this $200,000 in debt group is saying they feel a lot or a great deal of stress. Though the proportions change a little bit, as you get more stress, they stay in that about 50% range for those red bars. So I'm not going to say that above 20,000 you really feel a lot more stress about your debt, from this angle, but it definitely does look like at 200,000 that jumps up, because we're only looking at about 30% that are saying a lot or a great deal of stress when if you've got 100,000. So I think it jumps up at 200,000, and then it doesn't seem like it keeps getting more and more and more stressful. So we're going to look at a few different ways to slice this. The next most obvious one, I think, is household income. Because in theory, you could hold a lot of debt, but if you make a really big income, maybe that doesn't stress you out too much because you've got plenty to kind of cover it. So I wanted to pull this in from a previous survey. Again, we've got a big group that we don't have this data for, but we've got we're pretty spread out otherwise. So this is kind of interesting. I'm going to use this comparison. We'll take it with a grain of salt because we've only got it for about 30 respondents, but I decided to break it into two categories. There's the below $75,000 of household income group, and there's the above $75,000 in household income group. So let's see, how much debt do they have? Do people that have higher income have more debt? Yes, of our respondents, that is true. Let's ignore the question marks for now, because that could be either category. But with the less than 75,000, you've got a lot more in the no debt or 100,000 or less group, and not as many with this like bigger amounts of debt. And then if you're over 75K a year, your debt, the slope kind of goes the other way. There's the biggest proportion of them have over 300,000 in debt. So I would say, yes, true of our respondents. If you're in the bigger income group, you have more debt, but you can probably afford it, maybe. So let's see how that affects stress. Well, so I kept the bars the same, right? Okay, so you can see the shapes are the same, but now the colors of these columns are different. So that's how we can kind of say, okay, within those columns, what proportion felt what level of stress. So let's focus in on this, bigger income group. They have a lot bigger proportion of red stress and a smaller proportion of green. There's definitely plenty. There's people that are green that they don't have. They're not at all stressed about their level of debt, but there's way more red stressful proportions here than we see in this lower income group. That's interesting because I kind of thought maybe we'd see they make a lot more money, having more debt doesn't feel more stressful to them. But I don't think that's true. Perhaps they feel pressure to stay in a high-paying job because they're not going to be able to make ends meet and make all their payments with all the debt that they have if they make a lower income. So it's kind of easier. It's easier to go forward than backwards in that. You can't just decide to. If you've got gigantor payments, you can't decide to like cut your income in half necessarily without quite a bit of stress, even if maybe you hate your job, which blows. All right, now let's look. So, okay, income something, but maybe these folks that have low income, maybe they're all like young people that don't really have any investments, so they're not as, or they don't have a lot of stress, they're not, or a lot of debt, so they're not a lot of stress. So let's break this down by age, see if that's helpful. All right, so this is a gradient. The colors are a gradient, so the darker the color, the more debt. And then the legend's kind of at the bottom. So, if you're in your 20s, about 18% of the respondents in their 20s reported having over $300,000 in debt versus 10% that said they don't have any debt. So, and then we can see the other age groups and how their distribution works out. So to me, it looks like it's similar to the what chart was it earlier? It's kind of like this stress level by debt amount. So you get into your 30s and it looks like the amount of debt definitely jumps up. And then it stays pretty high. This 300,000 bar is much lower than it is for the 30s, but the over 300,000 bar is bigger than it is in your 30s. So I'd say, maybe it goes down slightly because you see this $100,000 bar is quite a bit higher, but it jumps up. Maybe it stays up to a degree, goes down a little bit, and then it goes down quite a bit more significantly in your 60s and 70s. See, because we've still got some with quite a bit, but this 300,000 bar isn't even present in here. So we've got a bigger 200 and then a bigger 100. So I think the story here is debt jumps up at 30, stays pretty high, decreases kind of maybe steadily into your 40s and 50s, and then it's typically lower in your 60s or 70s. I think that makes sense. It's probably about when you start to buy your first home, I'm guessing, getting your first mortgage. So a fair amount of people probably do that in their 20s, but more of them are doing that in their 30s, potentially starting their family in their 30s, all the stuff that comes with that. 40s and 50s, you're probably paying for school, clothes, maybe college tuition. And then after that, in your 60s and 70s, you probably don't have any kid overhead anymore, potentially. I'd say that might be the trend here on like debt decreasing. Now we're going to do the same thing we did before. You keep these bars the same, but then look at the stress levels within them. So let's go 60s and 70s here. There's not a lot of red in here and a lot of green. So it's looking like we already saw that the debt load or burden seems to be less in your 60s and 70s, and your stress level definitely seems to be less. There's not a lot of red in here. On the other hand, in your 20s, well, pretty much everybody else, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there's a lot of red, but especially in your 20s. Even if you don't have a lot, it looks like across the board, like 50 plus % are feeling a lot of stress about debt or more. A great deal would be the more. And that makes sense to me because you've probably got student debt, maybe a lot of it, and then you're starting your career and maybe not earning as much as you will later on in your life. And then maybe you're putting a mortgage on top of that, and maybe even starting your family. And then when you get into your 30s, then your family might be growing. You might be trying to sock away money for education, like, their college education. Yeah, your financial obligations just kind of increase to a point where maybe in your 40s and 50s it's starting to, well, it might be college time for your kids then, but then in your 60s and 70s, you might be kind of through the biggest challenges. Okay. I had some other ideas for things that would be really interesting to look at. For instance, like my kids theory. Do you feel more stressed about debt if you've got a bigger family? You providing for kids, their clothes, entertainment, school, saving for them, giving them all the opportunities you want to. I would guess you feel more stressed and you feel like you've got less options. You can't maybe quit your job and do something less high that pays less if you've got a bunch of mouths to feed. Unfortunately, we had that data for about half of our respondents, but most of them said they don't have kids, so we didn't really have enough to say. Remember, the biggest groups are in their 20s and 30s, so we didn't have a big enough group here to say, okay, no kids versus kids, unfortunately, so I didn't do that. Education level, I thought that would be pretty interesting because we could maybe assume that almost everybody has student loans. So what having an advanced degree does to your feelings about stress. And then your relationship status. If you're married, maybe there's more, you've got more confidence in your ability to pay down debt, potentially with two incomes, or at least one person. Even if you're a single income, you can kind of share the responsibilities of life, and one person can focus on earning to some degree. So I was interested in doing like married versus single. But again, not too many singles, really big group that hadn't answered it. So hopefully in the future, when we have a lot more responses, even if we had the same proportions of data availability, you could still do some really powerful analysis with small proportions of a big number. So hopefully in the future we can do some of this stuff. Okay, not quite done with stress yet. I hope you're not feeling stressed out about all this stress talk. If you are, pause the video, get yourself a LaCroix, and then come back. Okay, let's break down the questions of how much stress about debt do you feel, or how much does debt stress you out, and how much does debt influence your life. And this is like one of the most straightforward, I think, correlations or corresponding data elements in this whole analysis. Basically, the more stress you feel, the more it influences your life. If you don't feel stress at all, you'll probably say debt doesn't influence your life very much. If you say debt stresses you out a great deal, you're really likely to say that debt influences your life a great deal. And then it kind of gradually shifts as your stress level does. Bottom line, stress is bad. It affects almost everything. And then I wanted to put this in perspective. People are saying it's really stressful. I am stressed a lot about it. But unless you compare it to other things, some people might say, yeah, I'm stressed out about everything. So you might say, well, maybe the Boise State football game is as stressful as debt. Now, I didn't ask that as an option here, but I probably should have. But I wanted to put this into context to give us perspective. So I asked, how does debt compare to other stressful things in your life? Like, please rank them. So what we see here is an average ranking. So actually the highest ranked has the smallest bar. So public speaking was ranked the highest most consistently as the most stressful thing. And then death. Still blows my mind. I mean, that's an established phenomenon that people have more of fear of public speaking than of death, but always surprises me. I'm way more scared of death than public speaking. But then debt's number 3. Okay, public speaking, death, debt. So that beat out relationships, family, health, and career. So yeah, I'd say this is a pretty big deal. Okay, that's it for charts and graphs. We're almost done, but I want to draw attention to the comments. The comments are almost the best thing. Well, I mean, the reason I did this was for all the data analysis and all the charts and stuff. So I won't go that far, but the comments are really good. I would really strongly encourage you to look at them on this analysis and any analysis you read. You're probably going to learn more from the comments than from the charts. So I've got a nice little word cloud here to kind of show you which words were being used most in the question of what about debt gets too much attention. And then we've got another one here for what doesn't get enough attention. And I'm not going to go through these, but I bolded phrases that can help you skim these to find the ones you want to read in full. And maybe you just want to check out the bolding. But we've got a whole range of people talking about predatory lending, student loans, that people just are buying things they don't need and they just need to take more responsibility versus, you know, a whole range of stuff. So I would check it out. It's really good. And if you aren't too stressed out about this stress talk by now, here's a stressful GIF. This is what it looks like to be stressed out about debt. But anyways, that's all for this. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I just want to plug that if you haven't signed up yet, please sign up. Please participate in surveys. The only thing that makes this better, more positive, and more impactful is the more people that know about Make Idaho Better and the more people that take the surveys. The bigger our sample, the more powerful the results are. And the more we're going to learn. So do your part, participate, and hopefully, and if you can, share it with somebody that you think would be interested in it, and hopefully that'll spread the word and make this a bigger thing. So thanks a lot. Stay tuned till next time.